Janice, are you selling them at a Bay Life?
I look forward to selling them.
Yes,
Let
she
talk
is.
to them. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just have them soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, and so we're going to turn it over to Pat.
Well, hi, y'all. Uh, as she said, my name is Pat Murphy. Most people know it, but some people don't. I will start by saying that in 1980, if you told me that I would be writing a book about Bay St. Louis and my childhood, I would have told you that you were slapped nuts. Uh, had no, I always kind of liked creative writing, but had no qualms about writing a book or anything else. But at any rate, a little bit about my background. My background is that I was born and raised at King's Daughters, born and raised in Bay St. Louis. I was born at King's Daughters Hospital, which was on a house on the first block of Carroll Avenue. Dr. Marion Wolf delivered me along with about 2/3 of the rest of the residents of Bay St. Louis from that generation. And my mother's family was from New Orleans. They had moved over here in the 20s. My dad's family was from Napoleon, which is out in the buffer zone of the test site. And that my dad was fifth generation resident of Napoleon. They go way back. And so at any rate, my mother was an only child, and I was the first grandchild of my maternal grandparents. My grandfather was a downtown Bay St. Louis businessman from the 1930. He opened a business in 1933 in downtown Bay St. Louis, and so the birth announcement read that mother and son are doing fine, and so is Grandpa George. And it was because of the situation with my grandfather being a pretty well-known businessman in the downtown Bay St. Louis. I grew up around his store, and I ratted the streets of downtown Bay St. Louis whenever I had the opportunity. And everybody knew me, and I knew everybody else. And but that's not to say that if I did something I wasn't supposed to be doing, my grandfather would find out about it before I ever got back to the store. And that's just the way it was with most households with kids back then. But I could say rat the streets. I could run the streets of downtown Bay St. Louis without my parents or my grandparents worrying about whether I was going to be okay or whether anybody was going to watch after me or that kind of thing. And again, that was just the way it was back in that time period. Uh, Downtown Bay St. Louis at the time of my birth was completely self-sufficient. Uh, it was if the highway was Almond Avenue, the Highway 90 was Almond Avenue. This was before the concrete car bridge was built. Uh, the wooden car bridge was built in 28 and was at Almond Avenue and crossed over to Bayview Street and past Christian. And before that, there was a ferry boat that the ferry landing was around the Montlezun Street, and it would take you to past Christian. But uh, downtown Bay St. Louis was completely self-sufficient. I mean, there was, you know, two banks, and that was the only banks in town at the time, Merchants and Hancock. Uh, there was like 6 or 8 restaurants, uh, 3 or 4 grocery stores, uh, a bakery, appliance stores, men's stores, women's stores, full service department stores, shoe stores, uh, drugs. There was 3 or 4 drug stores. Whatever you needed, it was in downtown Bay St. Louis. And uh, in my book, I discuss the hurricanes being the time posts in the history of Bay St. Louis. The because the hurricanes, at the point of each hurricane, the history or the path of Bay St. Louis somewhat changed. I wasn't around for anything before Betsy, but the 1947 hurricane had done a lot of damage in Bay St. Louis on the beachfront and elsewhere, but they rebuilt after the 47 hurricane. And all of the businesses or buildings on the water side of Beach Boulevard opened onto the sidewalk and were built out level on creosote pilings out from the sidewalk. One of the things that we used to love to do as kids was that whole no man's land underneath all those old buildings was like, plethora of places to play. I mean, we'd chase pigeons and catch snakes and chase rats, and they had just old lumber and just all kind of stuff stacked up underneath there. And, of course, we'd all been threatened, we'd have been beaten within an inch of our life if our parents caught us down there, but we did it anyway. And, but in really, Bay St. Louis lulled along from the 47 hurricane all the way to Hurricane Betsy in 65, but Betsy did not do really a lot of damage to Bay St. Louis. But when Hurricane Camille hit in 1969, it completely wiped away the whole water side of Beach Boulevard. And, with all of those businesses that were gone, and nobody realized it at the time, but the exodus had already started of moving out to Highway 90. I forgot to mention three of the businesses that we had in downtown Bay St. Louis was automobile dealerships. We had a Chevrolet dealership, we had a Ford dealership, and we had a Pontiac dealership. And then down at Washington Street, there was an Oldsmobile dealership. But in the 1960s, Gulf Chevrolet moved out to the highway. My grandfather was a big electrical appliance dealer. At the time, he was probably the largest electrical contractor in Hancock County. He had a union shop and a non-union shop. He did a lot of commercial electric projects. And ironically, he wired the Winn-Dixie food store, which is out there where Zapatos is, and that was the first of the national retailers to come in to Bay St. Louis. Then next, he wired the TG&Y variety store, which was the predecessors of the Walmarts and the Kmarts and all of that kind of stuff. Nobody realizing what the effect was going to be on downtown Bay St. Louis. And before long, little grocery stores started closing. Some of the appliance stores closed. My grandfather used to sell toys at Christmas, big business. And before long, my grandfather wasn't selling toys anymore because TG&Y had that wrapped up. And so that's when I'm talking about the hurricanes changing everything. That was the first real change to downtown Bay St. Louis. I remember the night of Hurricane Camille, prior to Camille, as kids, we were always shut in the house with the shutters closed and candles burning because you didn't have electricity. And you as a kid, you were going, next hurricane, I'm going to be out in it. I want to be out where all the excitement is. So for Hurricane Camille, I was 19, 20 years old, and my friend Mike McGinnity and Drew Fillingame, we decided we were going to join civil defense. So we joined civil defense, and we were out in it. and we spent the night in the Hancock County Courthouse, and the walls, the plaster was falling off the walls, and the windows were blowing out, and all the women and children were screaming, "This is the end of the world, God take me," and all this kind of stuff. And they finally locked all the women and kids into jail because it was the strongest point of the building. Anyway, I crawled up underneath the Board of Supervisors boardroom table and figured, well, if the building caves in, maybe this will save me. But the next morning, when the sun came up, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was about 150 degrees and with about a 300% humidity. And I walked out of the front steps of the courthouse out into the middle of Main Street and looked towards the water and saw blue water. And that was the first time you'd ever been able to do that because there'd always been buildings there. So I said, uh-oh. But anyway, it built back some on the water side, built back some over the period of the next 30 years or something. But Katrina, did 10 times the damage that Camille did. And so it just, as I was getting older, downtown Bay St. Louis was drying up and blowing away, essentially. This was in the days long before the downtown development districts and Main Street programs and all that stuff, which came along in the 80s and 90s, but it was slow coming. I got involved with my grandfather's business, which I closed in 85, I think it was. And I produced a thing called the Beachfront Festival, which was a music and crafts and arts and crafts kind of outdoor festival, which was designed to bring people into downtown Bay St. Louis. And it did. We had 10, 15,000 people come into downtown Bay St. Louis for this festival. And one of the things that I did the second year that we had the festival was I got the idea of doing an antique photo exhibit. And I went to some people like Miss Mary Winard and Irene Hilly and Charlie Breath and some of those people, and they gave me old photographs. And I got 2 sheets of insulation board and stapled these photographs on this insulation board and had a display on down on Beach Boulevard during the festival, and it was one of the most popular things at the festival. And that led me to start collecting old photographs. And over the years, I just kept collecting, and I'd grab photographs wherever I could find them. And when Charles Gray came into town and really got the Historical Society going, we became real good friends, and what was mine was his, and what was his was mine, and we just swapped back and forth and still have a relationship like that. But sometime around, I guess, 2000, I had started kind of just writing some memories and things of what some of the businesses and things that I remembered about downtown Bay St. Louis. And I got the idea of trying to get Ellis Cuevas and Randy Ponder to publish this in the Seacoast Echo along with some old photos and things. And Randy was all for it. Ellis thought it was going to take up too much advertising space. But anyway, it ended up getting done. And it was hugely popular. It really was. And so I just kept dabbling with it, but I never did really get it anywhere close to where it would be finished. And finally, I came up with the idea. I said, "You got to get this to the point where you can do something with it." So I contacted Ellis Anderson with the Shoe Fly and said, "Ellis, would you mind running this in the Shoe Fly, 1 chapter a month, and we can run photographs and along with it, and first she said, well, let me think about it. And then she said, yeah, let's do that. So we did it, and it was really, really popular. And it accomplished just what I wanted it to accomplish. It kicked me in the rear end to where I had to have a chapter finished every month. And when all that was said and done, I basically had enough for a book, which then we started thinking about books, and I didn't have a clue about how to publish a book or how to put a book together or anything else. And Craig Johnson was a big help with me, and he helped me organize things, and we kept looking at publishers and different things. I talked to one publisher. I talked to him for like 6 months, and when he finally said, well, he said, I've gone about as far as we can go. I need $7,000. And I went, and Candy's going, no. And so that we left. We didn't do that. But I realized it was going to take money, which I did not have. And at some point, Alice Anderson said, you really ought to go talk to Chris Roth at the Historical Society. I really think he'd like what you were doing and stuff. So I went and talked with Chris, and we met and talked, and he said, there might be some grants available and different things. So we started brainstorming and trying to put it together, and one or two of those grants came through. We did. Craig came up with the idea of the online funding campaign, which Indiegogo was the one that we settled on, and we came up with the idea of selling pre-sold books on Indiegogo for a reduced price, and it was absolutely amazing how that took off. I mean, within 2 months we had sold, which we just ran it, you only run it for 2 months. At the end of that 2 months, we had sold close to 600 books, and which basically that was a little, with some more money that people, different business people had kicked in and given contributions and things to help out. And all that together, we had enough to have the book printed. And I'm good friends with Ken Murphy, who I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with his works and stuff. And Ken, he was a valuable help also. That we met and brainstormed, and I told him what I wanted to do, which was I wanted to be a nice coffee table type book. And he said, you're not going to be able to afford to do that. And I said, man, that's kind of a hell of a thing to say. And he said, well, I just mean you're not going to be able to afford to do it and have it printed in the United States. And I went, really? And he said, yeah. He said, I don't have my books printed in the United States. I'm sorry to say that, but it's the way it is. And he said, I would recommend you going to go online and look around for European printers. He said, or Chinese printers or Indian printers or whatever. And I went online and started looking, and really one of the first people I came to was a company that it looked like they had offices in London and in Paris. It's called Pulsio Print. And I emailed them back and forth, and she would very friendly and very cooperative in helping me, and really never went anywhere else because their prices were a third of what the prices in the United States printers were, and they offered some things that a lot of the printers in the United States did not offer. So it went on from there, and we finally decided what we were going to do with the Historical Society and the money, and we the profits mainly are going to the historical society, which is the way I wanted it to be, and we had the book. We placed the order for the books. Well, turns out, and it not. I mean, I knew this before we placed the order, but the company that is the public. I mean, the printer is in Sofia, Bulgaria. Okay, so okay, well, and the shipping, the normal way you ship books in this situation is by container shipping. And so, okay, they was talking about 6 weeks or thereabouts from the time they turn loose of the books till when their books arrive. And it took like 3 weeks to get from Bulgaria to Hamburg, Germany. And it took about 2 more weeks to get from Hamburg to Houston. And then in Houston, it all just kind of sat there with customs and all this other kind of stuff. And we were just going crazy trying to figure out, because we had all these people wanting to know, where's my book? Where's my book? And we had started scheduling book signings and all this kind of thing. And man, I keep calling a little girl over in Bulgaria and said, I got to get, we got to get this done. We got to get this done. And, I'm a firm believer in the man upstairs. And, I always say he's right on time. And we had our first book signing, I'm losing track, last Thursday at Midtown Pharmacy and Gifts. And I had been talking with Laurie, and I had been talking about because we had one at Waveland Library that Saturday, and I said, it's Monday and we still don't have books. We'll try to work something out, and the books came in on Wednesday, the day before we were to do the book signing at Midtown Pharmacy and Gifts, and it's just been a journey that it's unbelievable to me. I mean, the book turned out to me, it's the definitive book about what Bay St. Louis was like in that time period. And that's a relative time period. It's what I call practical history for Pat Murphy, okay? And because it's about what I like to read about. And so, I can't, it could have been another 100 pages if we'd had the money to do it, because I had, lots and lots of photographs, and I could have written more. We had one good thing I have to mention real quick is that Candy and I have a friend, her name is Elaine Bean, and she used to live here in the Bay, and her husband worked for the Sun Herald, and they worked for the Times-Picayune, and they lived in the first block of Washington Street. And editing and fashion editing and all that kind of stuff is what Elaine has always done. And I talked Elaine into editing my book, which until I wrote this book and got an editor, I thought an editor was proofreading. And that's a minute little part of what an editor does. And Elaine, boy, her and I, we butted some heads. But there's a chapter in there about the town characters, okay? And as I remember the town characters, and as I reminisce in the book about them, they were beloved individuals. The people in this town took care of them. They were members of the community just like anybody else. They might have had special needs, or they might have been bona fide nuts, but they were still town citizens. And Elaine took one read, and she says, "You're going to have to drop that chapter about the town characters." I went, "What?" She said, "Oh, you can't print that. You'll be in court 24 hours a day with people suing you." And we finally talked, and I said, "Elaine, you just don't understand. You had to live here to understand where I'm coming from. I'm not saying anything derogatory. I'm talking about them in a loving and kind way, and the chapters are going to stay." But a lot of other things, Elaine did say, "Well, you really shouldn't do this. You do this or do that." And she'd say, "You don't need to put this many words to say this one thing," or that kind of thing. And it really did help. And one of the first things that Elaine did was put together the dust cover for the book, which when she sent it to me, I mean, I was like, and Craig and I looked at each other, and I sent it to Craig and let him see it, and both of us said, "This woman gets it," and it really is because she had lived here, and so I really, the book was about my grandfather Stevenson in a lot of ways, but morphed into something so much more, and it's something that I'm really, really, really proud of. I know, my grandfather and all my relatives up in the clouds are smiling about it, and I know they'd be happy with what I've said, and and so far, like Mary said, everybody is, you got to get this book. You got to get this book. Well, it really is not so much about money yet. It's helping the historical society, accrue some funds, but they're working for it too. Believe me, it's a big job, but it's just it really is definitive Bay St. Louis. And one of the things that I want to work towards now, I mean, we're doing well locally on a local level as far as the word about the book and the interest in the book. I feel strongly that New Orleans has a huge enough community of people our age that grew up coming over here to spend 2 weeks at Mama and Papa's camp on Nicholson Avenue or whatever for 2 weeks every summer. Or they rented Aunt Alice's camp down in Clermont Harbor for a week every summer. And then they have those memories, and that's what this is all about. We when we were first getting started, I saw on Facebook that this guy had posted his name was Henry Beck, and he posted some photos of him and his mother playing on the beach when he was like 5 years old in 1947, on the beach, and it was exactly what this book was all about. And I figured out how to get in touch with him, and I asked him if we could use the photographs in the book, and he said, "Yeah, as long as you credit my father for the photographer." And we did, and they're perfect. He's a little kid with little round wire rim glasses playing on the beach with his mother in the water and stuff, and and again, that's what it's all about. So I would be happy to take questions if anybody has questions or wants to know anything about Bay St. Louis or the way things used to be or any of that kind of stuff. Okay.
I'll start us off with a question. Pat, is there a particular, the book is so chock full of photographs and memories and anecdotes. I love the one, I lost the page now, the one where Marianne Mobley was selected Miss Mississippi, went on
Yeah.
to become Miss
Yeah.
America, and
1958.
She came down. Was it Highway 90 or was it Beachfront?
No, well, it was what I remember. She probably came down Beach Boulevard, but she
And
came
stuck
up
her
Main
hand
Street
out,
to the
and
courthouse.
She shook your hand, and you never. And it was
I,
a month
I didn't
before
want
you
to wash.
washed that
I didn't want to
hand.
wash my hand for 6
So
months.
is
Yeah.
there another memory in particular that you just really enjoyed writing about and collaging the photographs
Up until Hurricane Katrina, I had a picture of this, but when Bay St. Louis had its centennial in 1958, that was a huge deal, and I talk about memories and things of that in there. But I was real close friends with a guy named Johnny Shattuck, who was the younger son of the general manager of Coast Electric. And we spent a lot of time spending nights at each other's house and just doing all kind of stuff. Anyway, they had a children's parade in the centennial. So me and Johnny built this contraption out of old lawnmower wheels and stuff, and it was one of these deals with with the rope to turn it, to steer it with the front wheels, and it's like shades of Tom Sawyer. I talked him into pushing me in the parade, and the whole time we were in this parade, all these boards and stuff that we made this truck or whatever out of kept falling off of it. And we were coming up Main Street, and we had to stop in front of my grandfather's store, which my grandfather's store was in the building where Murky Waters is today. We had to stop in front of my grandfather's store and go run in there and get a hammer from him and nail the thing back together again. Yeah. So just so many funny memories of that kind of stuff. It really is unbelievable.
You commented. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
I just wanted to digress on a little bit. I wanted to talk to Saint Candy over here.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing.
Well, Pat has done so well thanks to you.
Amen.
That's what I'm trying to say here.
Thank you, Jim.
And I know your lineage. Are you related to Mayor Garfield Ladner?
He's my grandfather.
Great man. I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. I'm a Waveland girl. He's a Bay St. Louis boy. When we got married, my family didn't want me to leave. I come to the Bay. It's too far.
Yeah, her daddy was trying to talk her out of it the whole way coming up the aisle. Not because he didn't like me, he just didn't want to lose his daughter, But we talk about, say that she was related to half of Waveland and the other half of DeKill, and I was related to downtown Bay St. Louis and the test site. And between the two of us, we had just about all of Hancock County at our wedding reception. And boy, it was a knockdown drag out too. I got all of my friends to come play music, and boy, we had a blast. My fondest memory of that is I got up there and was playing. I was behind a Hammond B3 organ playing a couple of songs. There was a picture at one time of me in the tux with the tie hanging off, and I'm sweating and stuff. But my daddy was running up there in front of the B3, beating on it, going, "Pat, Pat, Pat, play Brown Sugar." But it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey, and Jimmy's right, and I'm remiss. I think I did say it Saturday, but it could have never happened without Candy, and she's been there all along with me and constantly reinforcing and telling me how proud she is of me, and I'm proud to have her as my partner. So. Come on, somebody else got to have some questions.
Wait, so I'm curious about Ellen, the editor.
Uh-huh.
You said she grew up here, but she was so concerned about the characters. She must have known them, right?
Well, she didn't live here. She only lived here for a period of time.
Okay.
She wasn't here like we became about the time that Candy and I got married. which was in '75, was when we first got to know Elaine, and they were around until probably 10 years, 12 years. So and another thing too, Elaine they adopted a child, and she was a special needs kid. So Elaine was looking at it from that perspective too. But once she realized, where we were coming from, and talked to a few other people that felt the same way, she was okay with it. But the only thing we laughed, I laughed a couple of times. She would look at everything from a lady's perspective, and that's not me, okay? And not that I'd say anything wrong with it, but there's a thing in the beginning of the intro to the book or something, and it's something about it bring to mind memories of my Old Town Bay St. Louis or something like that I said, and her, when she wrote it, she had it brings to mind my memories of my sweet, sweet Bay St. Louis. And I said, I'm sorry, Lane, I'm not saying that, But I talked to her last night for a long time. She's going to be down here for the signing when we have it at the Historical Society in December. So I really appreciate everybody coming, and I will sign books or whatever.
I just had one other.
Thank you, Pat.
Go ahead. Jimmy's not finished.
Okay.
I got one other question. When are you gonna start the sequel?
That remains to be seen. You don't want to get Candy started on that.
Where did everybody go to school here back then? What schools?
Well, we had Bay High. Christ Episcopal was only to junior high. St. Stanislaus or St. Joseph's Academy. St. Joseph's Academy was, their last graduating class was in 1967. So, and I mean, and then we ran with the Village Idiots in the past, so you had, Pass High or the people that went to North Central or whatever, but that was about it,
Pat, I read in your book that I believe you played your band. You have a band. We haven't heard much about your music today.
Mm-hmm.
And that you played your first real professional band gig on New Year's Eve of what year?
1965.
65, and you played it at Trapani's.
Yeah,
And tell them how much you earned.
$10 a piece. And they wanted. I'd also state that they wanted us to, we were all like sophomores and juniors in high school, and they wanted us to stay out. I mean, to play another hour. They were all drunk and want to collect their hat and pay us to play another hour, and we all had to call home and make sure it was okay till we could stay out another hour. And that was a party for Ray Kidd and Stevie Kidd and Tommy Kidd and Tiger Jenin and all of that crew. So it was a knockdown drag out.
Frank Japan hire y'all? Frank Japan hire y'all?
No, it wasn't Frank. It was they rented the room in the back from Frank, and then they booked us themselves.
Anybody else? Well, go ahead.
You have a picture of the contraption you made for the parade?
I'm sorry, there's a picture of what?
The contraption you made with all the wheels?
Is there a picture in the book?
Oh, no, there's not. That's what I said. I had a picture before Katrina of Johnny pushing me with it, with me sticking my head out the door, but it got lost in Katrina. And although I never say never with pictures. Pictures have a way of resurfacing. We had one of the great things about our wedding was that there was a lot. So Bob Hubbard took the official photos, but there was lots and lots of candid pictures taken at that wedding. And one of them, there were several of them that were pictures of my dad and his best friend Jack Garriga, my Uncle Charles, my Uncle Rod, which my dad's brothers, and Claude Green, and all of them had snootfuls. And I mean, and my dad was holding court, you know, and the pictures all out of focus and everything, but I loved it. And somewhere Candy, just recently, they disappeared after the storm, and Candy was cleaning out a box of old photographs, and there in the bottom of the box of old photographs was that picture of my daddy. And I was so happy to get it.
We should also say that Pat and Candy were kind enough to loan us some of their original photographs, which are on display in the display cabinet right outside the meeting room next to his poster. So there's the old St. Stanislaus marching band where everybody's about this tall now, you know, and so if you'd like to take a look, there's some good stuff. I even managed to get the menu in the display cabinet.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Yeah, there's a menu from the White Kitchen restaurant from about 1950
You could get a
something.
ham sandwich for 35 cents.
Yeah.
So, okay, everyone. Well, thank you. Hey, one more.
Pat, would you just tell us what your folks did for a living, how they handled their lives?
My folks,
Your mom and dad.
my mother was a teacher. She taught third grade at Trinity, Holy Trinity, a Bay Trinity, and my dad was an electrician until 1969, and he went to work as head of the public relations department at Coast Electric. But we you know, they always provided for us, but we were not affluent by any means. But we lived a good life.
They did a good job on it.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Miss Sherry's back there.
Pat, I know you're working with Rotary, with polio and Rotary International. Do you talk about that in your book, about when you were struck with polio?
When I had polio,
Do you address that?
yeah, I mean, I talk about it a little bit in the book. I mean, when I was about 2.5 years old, I came down with polio, which this was like 1952. The last great epidemic was in '52, I think, and you know, it just happened, and I was quarantined at Charity Hospital in New Orleans, which at the time they called it the polio center, and I was in there for about 6 months, and I talk about my parents didn't own a car at the time, so they relied on kindness of strangers to go visit me. Frank Trapani's wife, Miss Jenny, was one of the people that used to cart my mother back and forth to New Orleans to go visit me. And I've got, I don't know if there's a picture in the book or not there's a picture of my dad and myself in the polio center playing, you know, with a toy closet or something. But you know, I was blessed. There's so many, I have memories of kids in iron lungs and kids, I knew kids locally that were braces from floor to neck, you know, and that kind of thing. And I never really had that, you know, and I never thought I'd be dealing with the after effects of it again like I am now. But it is what it is, and I'm not, you know, it's no big deal. So, okay.
Well, I feel like we should conclude by first having a small round of applause for Miss Candy.
Yay!
How many years? 48.
48 years together. Wow. Jimmy LaCanna predicted we would get married. We really hadn't even started dating, and I was I was waiting for him, and Jimmy Lacana walked up and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm waiting for Pat Murphy. Y'all are gonna get married."
Wow. Jimmy said that.
I know Jimmy said that.
Well, we certainly appreciate everything both of you have done to put the book together and working with the Historical Society. We're so excited for the two of you that it's finally materialized and it's finally here, and it's a wonderful testament to the history of Bay St. Louis. The book is full of things that people in this room, I think, who are from here or who have been from here at some point in your life will remember and recall in a fond, funny, upbeat kind of way. There's some great photos, and I love, Pat, that you didn't neglect putting some of our recent history in there, like the Katrina photos. The Katrina photo of Coleman Avenue looking down towards the water is just it. I've never seen that photo presented in that way. And so for those who didn't grow up in the Bay, I think you'll find some things that are relevant to your lives as well. And some photos that you haven't seen that kind of spark some recent memories of what was here that is no longer here. It's really a beautiful testament to the rebirth of the history and the rebirth of this very special place.
I just have one other thing I want to ask as a favor of everyone, is that if you have any kind of connection or know anyone in the New Orleans area who would be interested in this book, if you could tell them about the book. We are going to have a book signing at Octavia Books Uptown the Monday night before Thanksgiving, the 20th.